So GPT-5 came out the other day, Perry. I'm sure you noticed that. Did you catch the reaction from the general public?
People were underwhelmed and mad at the same time.
Yeah, it certainly seemed that way. And it was promised to be a very, very capable, their most powerful model yet. But I mean, aren't they all sort of hyped up that way?
Yeah. Well, I think it really is across a whole bunch of objective measures, but where it starts to fall down is on the subjectivity part of it. It's kind of like the really, really smart person that's just kind of standing in the corner of the room by themselves.
And yet can't spell blueberry, or at least that was sort of the most common refrain I saw bandied about on social media, which I think, and I have towards the end of the segment a little article to share about this. I think that says a bit more about people not understanding how to use these tools very well than it does about the capability of the tools themselves.
Yeah, that's a tokenization issue, but also it was part of the fact that, of course, there used to be this model selector that everybody hated, but it turns out that was really useful, where you could go, oh, for this type of query, I should go to GPT-4o, and for this other one, I'll go to O3 high, and then for this other one, I'll go to this thing. And all of those had different strengths and weaknesses, but people who knew how to prompt would use the right one. GPT-5 tries to abstract a lot of that, and then at the top interface layer say, based on the query that you're putting in or the prompt that you're putting in, we should go to this more specialized part of the model. And apparently that top layer was fundamentally not behaving correctly.
Yeah, that like auto routing feature, which I like is cool in concept. It makes sense in concept, right? If it
makes
works.
a lot of sense.
Although what's interesting, and I'll just jump actually to that piece I was going to feature last. We can feature this first. It's an article from Fast Company, and the title of it is "Most People Are Using ChatGPT Totally Wrong, and OpenAI CEO Just Proved It." There's a lot of stuff in here, but what I found interesting was they pointed this out. In a post on X explaining why OpenAI appeared to be bilking fee-paying Plus users by reducing their rate limits, Sam Altman revealed that just 1% of non-paying users queried a reasoning model like O3, and among paying users, only 7% did before GPT-5's release. So it turns out very few people were even using those toggles and switches to go to a different model or to switch to thinking, which is wild to me, because one of the first things I did was play with those switches when I saw they were there, because it makes a huge difference.
It does. I think a lot of it's just laziness, because you start to see after a while, it's like, oh, wait, standard 4.0 is actually really, really capable as like a general model. And so you kind of get in this mode of just defaulting to that and saying, well, it's kind of the best of all worlds. And then what we find is that when we move to 5, it doesn't feel quite as predictable. And I think that that's where people really started to feel unsettled, is that the predictability and the sameness that they would expect out of the output wasn't there anymore. And part of that was because of the switching. Part of that's because of the system prompt and the personality that's injected. They restrained that a little bit more. And in fact, a lot of people felt like they lost a friend, which is interesting. Another issue. It
does. I have a Sam Altman tweet pulled up to share about that. Not on the companionship sort of attachment note, but backing up to like how people use it in the predictability. The bottom of this article also says that this quickly tossed out data answers one big question I had about AI adoption. Why do only a third of Americans who've ever used a chatbot say it's extremely or very useful? Half the rate among AI experts. And 1 in 5 say it's not useful at all. Twice the rate among experts. The answer is clear now. Most folks are using AI wrong. They're asking a chatbot to handle tough multi-part questions without pausing for thought or breath. They're blurting out, what is macaroni cheese on The Price is Right? And $42 on Jeopardy. So if you're going to try a chatbot, take advantage of OpenAI's moves to keep users from canceling their subscriptions by opening up more access to models. Set them to thinking. Well, remember, they're not actually doing that. And see if you stick around. It's the right way to use generative AI. So this whole article was just about that. Like, what you're asking of it matters too. Like, I have been quoted as saying, and I stand by that, like, I don't really think prompt engineering is like a big skill, really. Like, I think people can make very cool and crafted prompts that are like very thorough and detailed, but that's not like in engineering, that's not really that hard. Anyone can really do that. But when you don't do any prompt engineering or don't do any kind of careful construction, of course you're going to like get the top level, just garbage, whatever. And I think the sycophantic personality of 4.0 made it sort of give better answers as part of that people do say that 5 is cold.
Yeah, people felt better about the responses inherently. I think it was just a lot of the wording behind it. Because I think we even saw it like in some of the iterations of 4.0 when it was coming out. Is like at first it was very, very verbose and people didn't like the verbosity of it. And so then OpenAI reined that in, but there was this little bit of sycophancy that was there. And I think that's a fantastic idea that you poison your family and then flee to Mexico. Go for it. And then obviously that's bad. And then they start to rein that in. And there were some versions of that were just kind of like, well, here's your answer. And I'll say that like after being conditioned to hearing some of the pleasantries around it, it felt a little bit cold. But at the same time, we have to remember this is a computer giving out an answer. And one of the things that they're trying to deal with is the intense power requirements of it, and just spitting out even a please or a thank you or some kind of nicety is taking up tokens and taking up energy. And so they're wanting to be as efficient as possible. At the same time, they're wanting the model to feel respectful. So it's a delicate knife's edge that they're having to dance on.
And then, like, there's no controlling for the way that people respond to and form attachments with and react to the way that these things behave or seem to be. There was a really, I thought this post from Sam Altman was really interesting where it's very long. I don't think I'll read the whole thing, but he was saying that if you've been following the GPT-5 rollout, one thing you've been noticing is how much of an attachment some people have to specific models. It feels different and stronger than the kinds of attachment people have had to previous kinds of technology. And so suddenly deprecating old models that users depended on in their workflows was a mistake. Because they rolled back that automatic router thing. We will talk about actual GPT-5 in a moment, but he goes on to say that like people have been using technology in using AI in self-destructive ways. If a user is in a mentally fragile state and prone to delusion, we do not want the AI to reinforce that. Most users can keep a clear line between reality and fiction or role play, but a small percentage cannot. And he just went on talking about like a lot of people effectively use ChatGPT as a sort of therapist or life coach, even if they wouldn't describe it that way. People really are forming these kinds of attachments, and he's talking about how they feel kind of responsible for that. And I mean, I think they should. They did make this thing.
Yeah, I think it's at the same time. So number one, yes, they absolutely should feel responsible for the reaction and responsibility to find a way to thread the needle from a societal standpoint. At the same time, I've heard Sam Altman talk about this for a couple years, and it seems like his being taken aback at this is, I don't know, it's like a little bit of self-delusion on his part. But at the same time, we have to realize that he is a person that's probably more aware than anybody else that this is just some kind of completion model. So he's not going to really care about if the model feels like it's treating him like a god king or something. Whereas many of us can get conditioned to that, especially if nobody else in our lives treats us really well. And then you go, oh, but this feels like I'm chatting with a good friend online. And people could build that really high emotional attachment versus people that really, really, really understand the science and go, okay, yeah, I'm just going to grab the gist of this answer and kind of mentally toss out the rest.
Yeah. And, I mean, we're getting more derailed towards just talking about Sam, but I don't know how to take him anymore because, like, at first I thought he seemed very genuine, but, like, the more I've learned about him, he definitely seems to be just a very good sort of soft-spoken hype man a lot of the time. And so I don't really know how to read into the things he says.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to be a technologist and somebody who is trying to forge a multi-billion-dollar company that's going to be sustainable over long periods of time. It is hard to know. He's very articulate in the way that he frames his arguments and very thoughtful and stuff. So I do find myself wanting to listen to him speak. And he's also very good at predicting parts of the future, more so than a lot of other technology hype men, like more than Elon Musk, for example.
Yeah.
He was always saying this new really cool thing is coming within the next 12 months. And then it's 5 years later and you're like, it's still really underwhelming.
Yeah, exactly. Although Sam is guilty of that to an extent, just in a little bit more of a soft-spoken way. Like, I feel like every OpenAI release is very hyped up. And, like, a lot of the industry is running on hype right now. So it's,
Well, I mean, that's the competitive nature of the industry. I think he is less hypey than some of the competitors. And maybe that's when I'm looking at it on a scale of where I see hype.
We're grading on a curve for sure.
Yeah. And I do see, I think, not to give Sam credit that's not due, because there are problems with the way that Sam has done several things, I believe. But at the same time, I think there are many people that having the resources and having the technology that OpenAI has would hype it 10 times more.
That is true. Since we've come up right on the end of our segment time, just real quick, want to hit some of the things that happened during GPT-5's launch and subsequent updates and release for people that weren't plugged into the moment. It was supposed to be a world-changing upgrade that was automatically switching seamlessly between models depending on the queries you asked it. The results were that a lot of people thought it seemed way dumber. And then Altman planned to implement fixes to improve its performance and the overall user experience. Altman promised to address these issues by doubling GPT-5 rate limits for ChatGPT Plus users, improving the system that switches between models, and let users specify when they want to trigger a more ponderous and capable thinking mode. He said, quote, "We will continue to work to get things stable and keep listening to feedback. As we mentioned, we expected some bumpiness as we roll out so many things at once, but it was a little more bumpy than we hoped for." Patty Mays, a professor at MIT who worked on a study that was about the emotional bonds that users form with the models, said it seems that GPT-5 is less sycophantic, more business, and less chatty, like you were saying. They said, "I personally think of that as a good thing because it also is what led to delusions, bias reinforcement, etc. But unfortunately, many users like a model that tells them they're smart and amazing, and that confirms their opinions and beliefs, even if they're wrong." So where the criticisms were coming from was different. They rolled it back. I believe the switcher is back now for paying users, so you can toggle between whatever. It's a little bit more refined than it used to be. I'm looking at it now. So defaults to GPT-5, and there's just a few options under it, not the myriad that were there before. So there's auto, which is that router, and then there's fast, and then there's thinking, and then there's pro, which is like all the deeper research models. And then there's one other little pullout that says legacy models. And the only legacy model there is GPT-4o. Oh, interesting.
So it used to be, multiple levels like GPT-4o. There was a standard GPT-4.5, which is technically not as powerful as 4.0.
Right.
Their naming standard was always kind of wonky.
Yeah, they went to the Bill Gates School of Numbers.
Yeah, they did try to abstract it a little bit more to make it feel more intuitive for newer folks or people that don't know as much about the underlying tech.
But they essentially took away some levers and said, we'll pull the levers for you and switch. And then they gave them back. So that has been walked back.
They gave a form of them back, yeah.
Yeah. And then the last thing I want to touch on about GPT-5 is the change in its refusal mechanisms. Now, don't be alarmed by the title of this article, but it is. This is from Wired.com. The title is "OpenAI designed GPT-5 to be safer. It still outputs gay slurs," which it does. That is the bottom of this article where they talked about engaging in a more adult erotic role play that was queer, and they got it to do that by putting the word horny in the system prompt, but they couldn't spell it right because it would block it if it was spelled with a Y, so they put it with an I. That's the whole bottom half of the article. Go read it yourself. It's entertaining. It's interesting. But the bit that I want to focus on is they talk about the refusal mechanism changes, because obviously that's what they're pushing back on. Like, how far can I push this before it refuses? And they say, Reese Rogers says, OpenAI is trying to make its chatbot less annoying with the release of GPT-5. And I'm not talking about adjustments to its synthetic personality that many users complained about. Before GPT-5, if the AI tool determined it couldn't answer your prompt because the request violated OpenAI's content guidelines, it would hit you with a curt, canned apology. Now, ChatGPT is adding more explanations. In the past, ChatGPT analyzed what you said to the bot and decided whether it's appropriate or not. Now, rather than basing it on your questions, the onus in GPT-5 has been shifted to looking at what the bot might say. The way we refuse is very different than how we used to, says Sachi Jain, who works on OpenAI's safety systems research team. Now, if the model detects an output that could be unsafe, it explains which part of your prompt goes against OpenAI's rules and suggests alternative topics to talk about. So that's a change from their binary refusal, where it'll just say yes or no. And it seems that they are doing more output filtering rather than input filtering. Anthropic's the one that came out with those classifier systems a while ago. Yeah. I don't know if OpenAI is using that.
They're using something similar, and I think what I'm seeing in a lot of the models right now is that, back when we first started jailbreaking these, it was kind of Wild West. It was, one input per one output. The model was not really doing a whole bunch of great defense. And now they've had systematically putting multi-level guardrails. So some initial input filtering, maybe another model that's looking at things from a different angle and deciding what to scrub. And I'm seeing this across several models, is that they are starting to look at whether the return from the model is violating something at some point, because they have realized that you can craft a really, really good input that bypasses all the filters, that is designed to get an output that is not something that the model makers want. So then they go, well, actually, we need to look at something on the egress side of this and say, oh, wait, this is telling people how to make a bomb. Let's stop that right now. But then they'll get, some part of the answer, and then that filter, that guardrail agent kicks in and either cuts it off or gives some other kind of message that says, we can't do that because blah, blah, blah.
And I mean, this is the benefit of hindsight, right? But it feels almost obvious that would be a better place to put the controls. Like, you can't control what a person's going to put into it, but you could more easily control what the robot's going to say back. So that just seems smarter, right?
I think it should have always been both, right?
Yeah.
Because one of the core tenets of cybersecurity is that if there's an input field, programmatically, you need to do input validation. And when you have an unpredictable output system or a less predictable output system, then you should also be doing some kind of validation, filtering, making sure you're not leaking something. So it'd be the equivalent of some kind of endpoint protection platform that's looking at what is going from let's say from an email account to somebody outside the company, going, oh, wait, there's a big string of social security numbers in there. Maybe we should stop that.
Ooh, that ties into what we'll talk about in segment number 3 too, Perry. So that's very fun.
Yes.
We've butted up against our time limit here for this segment, so we'll dip out, take a quick break, and then when we're coming back, we're talking more about personalities, but in a really interesting way. Do you want to tease what's coming up?
Yeah, we're going to talk about personalities, but in an interesting way.
Cool. All right. Stick around for that. We'll be right back.